111 new government programs as far as health care. 11 new taxes as part of this health care. A 3.9% surcharge tax on Medicare as long as you make $200,000 above. Now, who are they to say that $200,000 qualifies you as being rich? Because I don't think that's a whole heck of a lot of money. See, we are living in a time where success is being demonized. And that's why I tell people, you got to read and understand Saul Alinsky. Because those are the tactics that they're unveiling upon the United States of America. We've got to reform our tax code. We've got to get away from this progressive tax system. I believe in the flat tax. You know the reason why I believe in the flat tax first and foremost? You can't have half of this country and they don't have skin in the game like we used to say back in the inner city. Because everyone has to be part of this republic. Everyone has to be part of the rule of law. Because if not, then the entitlement class grows on the backs of the production class. And sooner or later, has been the history of socialist economic theory, the production class stops producing. And that's the road that we're on here in the United States of America. What we need to do, you need to look at your payroll tax. We need to have a payroll tax holiday so we can infuse money to the employees and to the employers. Capital gains, dividends tax need to be eliminated. Death tax needs to be eliminated. We need to look at every single means by which we can transfer the wealth of the American people back to your pockets. Because as I said, that's where investment, ingenuity, and innovation comes from. Now that's just not enough. How many people remember that movie Dave? Fun movie. The best part of that movie was when Dave went out and got his CPA. And he came into the White House, and what did he say? He said, I can't run my business like this. And they went line by line, and they figured out how we could start cutting programs. And Dave sat in there as an imposter president and looked at those cabinet members and said, I mean, do you really think this program is viable? And the cameras rolling, no, Mr. President. That's what we have to have people that will be willing to do. To go in and say to the federal government, what are the mandates to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, to promote the general welfare, to provide for the common defense, to secure the blessings of liberty, to set the conditions for the American people to have life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But we have a federal government now that is about enslaving the American people and not empowering them through the economic policies that they're sending down. That's why the 2nd of November is the most important election for the future and the legacy of this republic. Because the 2nd of November, the midterm elections, is about the legislative agenda of America. It's not about American Idol, which what we saw in 2008.
Yes.
What you have got to do, you have got to become educated on the issues. And you've got to go out and talk to other people about it. And these issues are things that transcend party lines. It is about doing what is right by this country. It is about going back and understand that what made this country great in 234 years is not a socialist economic theory. It's not a Marxist class warfare theory. But it's about believing in the individual and what they can achieve. It is about believing in our free market system. It's about believing in this thing called capitalism. And I don't believe that there are things out there that are too big to fail. Because part of the free market is risk, ladies and gentlemen. And as you go into the free market, Mr. CEO or President, it's your responsibility to mitigate that risk, not the American taxpayer. Because one of the basic premises of who we are is this thing called creative destructionism, which is why we're still not going around in horse-drawn buggies. Because as something falls asunder, someone else picks up and takes it to the next generation. You know, I remember when my little home in Atlanta with 2 around-the-dial telephones, that was it. And if you had ever told me that I could sit in a car, drive anywhere across the country, and be tied to a thing called the internet, And also be able to talk, I would tell you there's no way possible. But see, we've made it possible here in the United States of America because we unleash the entrepreneurial spirit that makes this country great. If we're not careful, come January 2011, if all of these taxes kick in, if the people are not sitting up there in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate to push back, I'm going to ask you one simple question. Are you prepared to leave less to your children and grandchildren than what was left to you?
No.
That's my challenge to you. My challenge, get out. This is not, as Chairman Dinerstein says, this is not a spectator sport. You got to come down out the stands and you got to get engaged. You got to get involved. Because the other side, let me tell you something, they don't think that you're willing to fight. That's why the ACORN people will be out. The SEIU folks will be out. That's why the NAACP all of a sudden stood up and said that American people exercising their First Amendment rights to redress their grievances to the government are all of a sudden racist.
That's me.
That's why you have a federal government that has sued a sovereign state and taken away the constitutional right of that state to protect its citizens just because they're playing politics. And they need a voter electoral block. And I don't believe in this thing that Americans won't get out and work. I think if we set the conditions for our companies and small businesses to offer the right type of wages, Americans are going to get out there and work. But if we're not careful, we can have more sanctuary cities right here in Congressional District 22, just like we have in Jupiter. Just like Lake Worth is becoming. Next thing you know, it's going to come here to Palm Beach Gardens. And it's going to affect your standard of living. Now is the time for principled leadership that stands up and fights and says that we will not make the American people economic slaves. We will make the American people economic victors. So, God bless you all for coming out, and let's take some of your questions. Thank you.
Carol. Hi.
Yes, sir.
How are you? I got a three-part question, three separate things. I'd just like to hear your take on how you would handle it. A lot's happening by executive fiat. Constitution doesn't exist. It marginalized the entire Congress, number one. So how do you deal with that? Secondly, if in fact we are on the road to becoming Greece, and we take steps as a country to say we're going to take some of that money and we can't afford it, whatever, how do you help people get through the pain and avoid the anarchy? And the third thing is your thoughts on term limits.
Well, I start with the easiest question, which is your last question. I believe in term limits. I think that when you sit around and you look and see people there in Washington, D.C., you know, I think it's Congressman Dingell from Michigan, 57 years. Charlie Rangel, 40 years. This is what I believe in. I believe that in the legislative branch, the maximum should be 12 years. And the reason why I say 12 years, 2 terms for the United States Senate, 12 years. But for the House of Representatives, I think you get 8 years max. You know, 4 2-year terms. And the reason why I say 8 years, because in case you're in the House of Representatives, you want to jump over, you want to run for a Senate seat, that's fine. But the maximum is still 12 years. And I think that's very important. Because you look around at some of these congressional districts, there's an apathy out there. And we need to have some type of fail-safe means. Look right down here, you know, Alcee Hastings. That's a prime example. You know, an impeached federal judge that continues to just go back and back and back. So I do believe in term limits. Now the second question, as far as, you know, the American people, I think it comes down to leadership. I mean, Ralph talked about it, those C's. It's about courage, it's about confidence, commitment, conviction, and character. You know, when I stood up in front of that battalion in Kuwait, and we had about 700 soldiers, and we had to take a 3-day road march, drive 25 miles an hour, all the way to get into our base of operations just north of Baghdad. And you got to look at them, you got to tell them, it's going to be tough, it's going to be hard, but if we stick to our principles, if we understand our training, we'll be able to make our way through this. And I think right now we got to stop coddling the American people. One of the things that I see is that individual responsibility and accountability is the #1 culture